She saw her violent ex charging through JFK Airport, seconds from dragging her back to hell. Desperate, she grabbed a stranger in a perfect suit.
Please help me.
And kissed him, whispering, "Please, I'm begging you, help me." What she didn't know, the man she kissed was Vito Carmelo, one of the most dangerous mafia bosses on the East Coast, and he just decided she was his to protect forever. The recycled air of JFK Terminal 4 tasted like freedom. Mandy Lewis gripped her boarding pass to Miami so hard the paper crinkled, leaving damp creases from her sweating palms. Gate 23, just past security. 100 yards between her and escape. 100 yards between her and a life where she didn't flinch at footsteps or check over her shoulder every 5 seconds. She'd pawned her grandmother's locket for this ticket. Sold her laptop, her good winter coat, everything that wasn't essential. The bruises on her ribs from 2 weeks ago had finally faded to a sickly yellow-green. She could breathe without wincing. Almost. Then she saw him. Edward. Her blood turned to ice in her veins. He was cutting through the crowd near the Delta check-in counters, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with that predatory purpose she knew too well. His eyes were scanning the terminal, hunting, searching, looking for her. Their eyes locked across 50 feet of airport chaos. His expression transformed instantly, rage melting into something worse. Triumph. That possessive smile that meant consequences. "Mandy!" His voice carried over the ambient noise of rolling suitcases and gate announcements. People turned to stare. "Don't you fucking dare!" He started running. Mandy's heart slammed against her ribs. Security was standing 30 feet behind Edward, but they weren't moving, weren't paying attention. Last time she'd called the cops, Edward's father, District Attorney Marcus Laurent, had made it disappear, made her look hysterical, unstable. This time would be no different. If Edward caught her here, if he caused a scene at the gate, they'd never let her board. Or worse, he'd find out where she was going, track her to Miami, find her again. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her eyes darted frantically across the terminal families with strollers, business travelers buried in their phones, a woman juggling coffee and a screaming toddler, an elderly couple shuffling past, and then him. A man stood near the first-class check-in counter, radiating wealth and authority like heat waves off summer asphalt. Tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from Italian marble, all sharp angles and aristocratic features. His charcoal suit fit him like it had been painted on, probably custom-made, probably cost more than she'd earned in 6 months waitressing. No tie. The top button of his black dress shirt was undone, revealing the column of his throat. Even from this distance, he commanded attention. People unconsciously gave him space, deferred to him without knowing why. He glanced up from his phone. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Mandy made her choice. She ran straight toward him, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. She had maybe 8 seconds before Edward reached her. 8 seconds to gamble everything on a stranger's mercy. The man's dark eyes widened fractionally as she approached, but he didn't move, didn't step back or turn away. He simply watched her come, utterly still, like a dangerous animal deciding whether you were prey or something more interesting. "I'm so sorry," Mandy gasped when she reached him. Then she grabbed the lapels of his expensive suit, pulled him down to her height, and kissed him. Time stopped. His lips were warm against hers, firm and unexpectedly soft. She felt him go completely still, every muscle in his body tensing. For a horrible second, she thought he'd push her away, call security himself, end her last desperate gamble before it began. Then his arm came around her waist, strong, protective, possessive. He was kissing her back. "Please, I'm begging you, help me," Mandy whispered against his mouth.
Please help me.
Her voice breaking on the words. "My ex, he won't let me leave. Please." The stranger pulled back just enough to look at her face. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, intelligent and assessing. There was something in his gaze she couldn't name: surprise, certainly, but also calculation, interest, and beneath it all, something that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. Recognition, like he understood exactly what she was running from. "Mandy!" Edward's voice exploded right behind her. "Get away from her! Mandy! What the hell do you think?" The stranger turned, keeping Mandy tucked firmly against his side. She felt the shift in his body language, the casual confidence hardening into something else, something that made the air feel dangerous. "There a problem?" His voice was low, controlled, and carried more threat in those 3 quiet words than all of Edward's shouting ever had.
"Mandy, get away from her!" "Security, this man is harassing my fiancée." "I'll get you, Mandy!"
Edward stopped short, his face flushing red. That's my girlfriend. She's confused. She needs to come with me. I'm not your girlfriend, Mandy said, her voice steadier than she felt. I broke up with you 3 months ago. Edward. Baby, don't do this here. Don't embarrass yourself. The lady seems very clear to me. The stranger's grip on her waist tightened fractionally, a silent message only she could feel. I've got you. I suggest you back off. Edward's expression twisted with rage. Who the fuck are you? You don't know what you're getting into, buddy. Her father's a district attorney. You're making a big mistake. Something flickered across the stranger's face, not fear, but something close to amusement. Like Edward had just said something unexpectedly funny. 2 airport security guards appeared, drawn by raised voices and the small crowd forming around them. Everything okay here? The older guard looked between the 3 of them, his hand moving toward his radio. This man is harassing my fiancée, the stranger said smoothly, before Edward could speak. His voice carried an authority that made both guards unconsciously straighten. She has a restraining order. He's violating it. Mandy didn't have a restraining order. Edward's father had gotten the request denied. But the lie bought them precious seconds. Sir, is this true? The younger guard stepped toward Edward. Do you know this woman? Yes, but she's lying. He's lying. She's my... Sir, I need you to step back. Now. You don't understand. Step back or we're calling NYPD. Mandy watched, barely breathing, as the guards physically moved Edward away from them. He was shouting, protesting, his face purple with fury, but the crowd around them was growing. People were filming on their phones. The guards weren't taking chances with a potential stalker in front of dozens of witnesses. This isn't over. Mandy! Edward's voice carried across the terminal as they escorted him toward the main security checkpoint. You can't just... Then they turned a corner, and he disappeared. Mandy's knees nearly gave out. The stranger's arm around her waist was the only thing keeping her upright, grounding her to reality. Breathe, he said quietly, his voice different now, softer, though no less commanding. You're safe. Breathe. She realized she'd been holding her breath. She dragged in air, once, twice, her whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. I'm sorry, she whispered, looking up at him. This close. She could see details, the precise line of his jaw, a small scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the way his dark eyes studied her face with unsettling intensity. I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. He would have followed me to Miami, and I just needed... Don't apologize. He cut her off, still watching her with that unreadable expression. You did what you had to do. That took courage. Thank you. Her voice cracked. Thank you so much. I should go. My flight. He glanced at the boarding pass she was still death-gripping in her free hand. Gate 23. American Airlines to Miami. They're boarding in 8 minutes. She nodded, stepping back from him reluctantly. His arm dropped away, and she immediately felt colder. Less safe. Go, he said. Don't miss your flight. Mandy turned toward security, then hesitated, looking back. I don't even know your name. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but wasn't quite. Vito. Vito, she repeated. Thank you, Vito. I won't forget this. Neither will I, he said quietly. Something in his tone made her pause, made her heart skip. But her boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. She ran for security, glancing back once to see him still standing there, watching her go, his phone already at his ear. Mandy Lewis had no idea she'd just kissed one of the most powerful crime bosses on the East Coast, and Vito Carmelo had already decided she was worth keeping. Hit that subscribe button right now. Miami hit Mandy like a wall of humidity and hope the moment she stepped off the plane. Her Aunt Rosa picked her up in a battered Honda Civic that smelled like Café Cubano and vanilla air freshener, pulling her into a crushing hug that made Mandy's ribs ache. Mija, you're skin and bones, Rosa declared, steering them toward Little Havana. We fix this. You eat, you rest, you start over. Rosa's 2-bedroom apartment was small but vibrant, colorful tiles, plants everywhere, the constant soundtrack of salsa music drifting up from the street. Mandy collapsed on the pull-out couch that first night and slept for 14 hours straight, the first real sleep she'd had in months. On her 3rd day in Miami, the first miracle happened. Mandy was sorting through the stack of collection agency letters she'd been carrying like stones in her bag when her phone rang. A representative from Consolidated Credit Services, calling about the $30,000 in fraudulent charges Edward had racked up in her name. Miss Lewis, we're calling to inform you that your account has been resolved in error, the woman said, her tone almost apologetic. The debt has been cleared from your record. You should receive confirmation letters within 5 business days. Mandy stared at her phone after hanging up, certain she'd misheard. But 3 more calls came that afternoon. Same message. Debts resolved. Accounts cleared. Sorry for the inconvenience. Maybe they finally believed me, she told Rosa that evening, though her hands shook as she said it. Maybe someone actually looked at the fraud evidence. Rosa squeezed her shoulder. God works in mysterious ways, Mija. The second miracle came 2 days later. Mandy had been hitting every restaurant in a 5-mile radius with her resume when she got a call from Mariposa, an upscale Cuban fusion place on Brickell Avenue she hadn't even applied to yet. Your name came highly recommended, the manager said. We'd like to offer you a position. The pay is $18 an hour plus tips. Can you start Monday? Mandy said yes before her brain fully processed it. 18 an hour. That was almost double what she'd been making in New York. The third miracle arrived via voicemail from her lawyer, the overworked public defender who'd barely returned her calls before. Miss Lewis, I have good news. The harassment charges against Edward Laurent are being processed by the New York State Attorney General's office. They're taking it seriously this time. I'll keep you updated. Mandy played the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. After 18 months of dismissed complaints and denied restraining orders, someone was finally listening. You see? Rosa said, hugging her. Things turn around. You're meant to be here. Mandy started at Mariposa the following Monday. The restaurant was beautiful, exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a menu that made her mouth water. Her co-workers were friendly. The tips were good. For the first time since she could remember, Mandy felt like she could breathe. She didn't notice the well-dressed man who came in for lunch every Tuesday and Thursday, always requesting a table in her section. Marco was charming, professional, tipped 30%, and never made her uncomfortable. Just a regular customer. She didn't notice Sophia, the pretty brunette who'd moved into the apartment down the hall, always seeming to run into Mandy in the building's courtyard. Sophia was so friendly, offering rides to the grocery store, inviting Mandy for coffee, becoming a fast friend. Mandy was too busy being grateful for her sudden good fortune to notice the shadows that had begun watching over her, or the man in New York who was tracking every moment of her new life with obsessive attention. Edward Laurent's apartment looked like a crime scene. Empty beer bottles covered the coffee table, takeout containers spilled across the counter, his laptop screen glowing in the darkness at 3 a.m. He'd been at this for hours, searching, digging, hunting. She couldn't just disappear. She was his. The harassment charges were supposed to vanish his father had promised, but instead, they'd escalated. The state attorney general's office was involved now, asking questions his father couldn't make go away. And the debt collectors who'd been hounding Mandy for months? Silent. Every single one. Like someone had flipped a switch. Something was wrong. Someone was interfering. Edward. His father's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. D.A. Marcus Laurent stood in the doorway of the apartment, looking at his son with disgust. We need to talk. Not now, Dad. I'm busy. You're spiraling. Marcus stepped inside, closing the door. The AG's office is asking about evidence tampering. About cases I've dismissed involving you. Do you understand what that means? You'll handle it. You always do. Not this time. Marcus's jaw clenched. Someone sent them everything, Edward. Every complaint Mandy filed, every police report, hospital records. They have dates, names, witnesses. This isn't going away. Edward barely heard him. His eyes were locked on his laptop screen. On the credit card alert he'd finally found buried in spam. One charge. Miami International Airport parking, 2 weeks ago. She's in Miami, Edward whispered. Let her go. She's mine. She's gone. Marcus slammed his hand on the wall. And if you go after her, you'll destroy both of us. Walk away, Edward. For once in your goddamn life, walk away. But Edward was already pulling up flight options, his hands shaking with rage and anticipation. Mandy thought she could run? Thought some airport security guards and a stranger in a suit could save her? He'd show her what happened when she embarrassed him. He booked a flight to Miami for the following morning, one way, using cash for the hotel so his father couldn't track him. He'd find her, make her understand, bring her home where she belonged. What Edward didn't know was that the moment his credit card processed that American Airlines ticket, an alert pinged on a secure server in Manhattan. Angelo called Vito at 4:30 in the morning. Boss, Laurent just booked a flight to Miami. Leaves JFK at 9:15. Arrives at noon. Vito was already awake, standing in his penthouse office overlooking the city, a glass of espresso growing cold on his desk. He'd been reading Angelo's latest report on Mandy. She'd started her job at Mariposa, seemed to be settling in, smiled more according to Marco's observations. The news about Edward erased that small satisfaction. Increase surveillance, Vito said quietly. I want 4 operatives on her. Rotating shifts. Marco and Sophia stay close. And contact our people at Miami International. I want to know the second Laurent's plane touches down. You want us to intercept him at the airport? No. Vito's reflection in the window looked dangerous. Let him think he's hunting. I want to see what he does. And you? Vito glanced at his watch. Have my plane ready in 2 hours. I'm going to Miami. Boss, is this about? She asked me for protection, Angelo. Vito's voice went cold. She kissed me and begged for my help, and I don't break my promises. He hung up and made another call. Book me a suite at the Mandarin Oriental, he told his assistant, and find out everything about a restaurant called Mariposa. I think it's time I visited Miami. In the darkness of his apartment, Edward Laurent packed a bag and imagined Mandy's face when he found her. Fear, apology, submission. He had no idea he was walking into a trap, and that the most dangerous man on the East Coast was already on his way to make sure Edward Laurent never touched Mandy Lewis again. Edward spent his first day in Miami watching Mariposa from a coffee shop across the street. He saw her through the windows laughing with coworkers, serving tables, looking relaxed in a way that made his blood boil. She was supposed to be miserable without him, broken, begging to come back. Instead, she looked happy. That evening, he followed her Toyota Corolla as she left work, staying 3 cars back. She drove to a modest apartment building in Little Havana, parking in a covered lot. Perfect. Isolated. He could corner her there tomorrow, make her listen, remind her who she belonged to. What Edward didn't see was the black Mercedes that had been following him all day. Or Marco, who'd positioned himself at the restaurant bar with a clear view of both Mandy and the coffee shop across the street. Or Sophia, who'd walked Mandy to her car under the pretense of heading the same direction, chatting cheerfully while scanning for threats. The next evening, Edward made his move. He waited in the parking garage as Mandy's shift ended, his heart pounding with anticipation. When her car pulled in, he stepped out of the shadows. Mandy saw him and froze, her keys dropping from her hand with a metallic clatter. "Hello, baby," Edward said, moving closer. "Miss me? Stay away from me." Her voice shook but held firm. "I'll scream. I'll call the police. Go ahead. My father's already dealt with your little harassment charges." A lie, but she didn't need to know that. "You embarrassed me at that airport, Mandy. Made me look like a fool. You're coming home so we can talk about that." He reached for her arm. Before his fingers made contact, Marco appeared from behind a concrete pillar, his movement fluid and practiced. "I don't think the lady wants to talk to you." Edward spun around. "The man from the restaurant, the regular customer." "This is none of your business." "Actually, it is." Sophia emerged from the stairwell, her friendly demeanor completely gone, replaced by something cold and professional. She held her phone up. "Smile. You're on camera assaulting someone with an active restraining order." "I don't have a restraining order against me." "You do now," Marco said. "Filed this morning. Miami-Dade County. You're in violation." Edward's confusion turned to rage. "Who the fuck are you people?" "Friends," Sophia said simply. Marco stepped between Edward and Mandy, and despite being roughly the same height, something about Marco's stillness made Edward take an involuntary step back. "You should leave Miami. Tonight. Because if you come near Miss Lewis again, you won't be dealing with us." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Edward looked at Mandy, at these 2 strangers protecting her, at the camera still recording. Nothing about this made sense. She was just a waitress. How did she have people like this watching her? "This isn't over," he said, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Yes," Marco replied quietly. "It is." Edward fled to his rental car, his hands shaking with humiliation and fury. Someone was helping her, someone with resources. He'd find out who. He'd make them all pay. As his taillights disappeared, Mandy turned to Marco and Sophia, her whole body trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered. "Really?" Sophia and Marco exchanged a glance. "Someone wants to make sure you're safe," Sophia said gently. "That's all you need to know right now." But Mandy's mind was already racing back to JFK Airport, to expensive suits and dark eyes and a man who'd said his name was Vito. Vito stood in his suite at the Mandarin Oriental, watching Miami's glittering skyline. When Angelo called with the update, Laurent approached her in the parking garage. Marco and Sophia intervened. "No physical contact. We have everything on video." "And Mandy?" "Shaken but unharmed. Sophia's staying with her tonight." Vito's jaw tightened. Edward had gotten too close. That ended now. "Where's Laurent now?" "Checked into a motel on Biscayne. He's making calls, agitated." "Good. Let him stew." Vito turned from the window. "Tomorrow, I visit Mariposa. It's time Mandy and I had a conversation." "Boss, she's going to have questions." "I know." Vito smiled slightly. I'm counting on it. He'd been watching her from a distance for weeks through reports, surveillance photos, Marco's observations, but the memory of that desperate kiss haunted him. The way she'd looked at him with such raw need for protection. Tomorrow, he'd look into those eyes again. And he'd make sure she understood. Edward Laurent was the least of her problems now, because Vito Carmelo had decided Mandy Lewis was his to protect. And what Vito claimed, he kept. Mandy couldn't sleep. She lay on Rosa's pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying the parking garage confrontation in her mind. Marco and Sophia weren't just friendly neighbors and regular customers. They were trained, professional, watching her. Someone wants to make sure you're safe. There was only one person who made sense, the man from the airport, Vito. She pulled out her phone and stared at the business card he'd given her. No company name, just a phone number embossed in black ink. She'd kept it tucked in her wallet like a talisman. How had he known Edward would come to Miami? How had he arranged for people to watch her? What kind of man had resources like that? And more importantly, what did he want in return? Rosa shuffled into the kitchen at 6 a.m. to find Mandy already dressed for her breakfast shift at Mariposa. Mija, you look terrible. You didn't sleep? I'm fine, Tia. Mandy forced a smile. Just a long night. At Mariposa, Mandy went through her morning routine on autopilot, setting tables, grinding coffee, memorizing specials. The restaurant wouldn't open for another hour, but she needed the distraction. The door chimed. We're not open yet, she called without looking up. I'm not here for breakfast. That voice, low, controlled, unmistakable. Mandy's head snapped up. Vito Carmelo stood in the doorway, wearing dark slacks and a charcoal dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. He looked exactly as she remembered, dangerous, elegant, completely out of place in the morning light streaming through Mariposa's windows. You, she breathed. Hello, Mandy. He closed the door behind him, and suddenly the restaurant felt very small. I think we need to talk. Her heart hammered. About what? About Edward Laurent showing up in Miami. About Marco and Sophia. About the debts that mysteriously disappeared, and the job that fell into your lap. He moved closer, his dark eyes never leaving hers. About the fact that you kissed me 3 weeks ago and asked for my help. Mandy's hands gripped the back of a chair. It was you. All of it. The collections agencies, the job, the people watching me. Protecting you, Vito corrected gently. Yes. Why? Her voice cracked. I'm nobody. Why would you do all this? Vito stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the intensity in his eyes. Because you chose me, Mandy. In that airport, with seconds to decide, you looked at me and trusted me to keep you safe. Do you have any idea how rare that is? I didn't know you. I still don't know you. You knew enough. His voice softened. You knew I was dangerous. You knew I had power. And you kissed me anyway because your instincts told you I'd protect you. You were right. Who are you, Vito? Really? He could have lied. Should have, probably. But looking at her, this brave, broken woman who'd gambled everything on a stranger's mercy, Vito found he didn't want to. I'm someone who operates outside the law, he said carefully. Someone with resources most people don't have. Someone who can make problems disappear. He paused. Someone who doesn't let go of what's his. I'm not yours. Aren't you? His lips curved slightly. You asked for my protection, Mandy. I gave it. And now Edward Laurent knows someone's watching over you. Which means you're a target. The color drained from her face. What? Edward won't stop. Men like him don't. And now that he knows you have protection, he'll want to know who, why. He'll dig. And when he digs, he'll find things that will put you in more danger than he ever could. Mandy's legs felt weak. So what are you saying? Vito stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I'm saying that kiss connected us, whether you intended it or not, and I take care of what's mine. Edward Laurent sat in his motel room, laptop open, rage simmering beneath his skin. He'd spent the last 6 hours researching, calling in favors, trying to identify the people protecting Mandy. The parking garage footage showed 2 professionals, too smooth, too coordinated to be random Good Samaritans. Someone had hired them. Someone with money and connections. His mind kept circling back to the airport. That man in the expensive suit who'd interfered, who'd lied about a restraining order, who'd looked at Edward like he was an insect. Edward pulled up saved security footage he'd obtained through his father's connections, grainy video from JFK Terminal 4. There. Mandy running toward the first-class check-in, kissing a tall man in a charcoal suit. The man's face was partially obscured, but his body language radiated authority. Edward zoomed in on the man's profile, ran it through facial recognition software he'd bought on the dark web. No matches in public databases. But when he expanded to criminal intelligence networks his father had access to, something pinged. Vito Carmelo, age 42, no official criminal record, owned several import-export businesses in New York and Miami, suspected ties to organized crime, known associate of several investigated RICO cases, never charged. Edward stared at the screen, his blood running cold. Mandy had kissed a mobster, and now a mobster was protecting her. This was bigger than he'd thought. Dangerous. His father had warned him to walk away, and maybe he should. Maybe this was one fight he couldn't win. But then he remembered Mandy's face in that parking garage, defiant, protected, no longer afraid of him. No. She was his. She didn't get to humiliate him and walk away. She didn't get to choose someone else. Edward picked up his phone and made a call. I need information on Vito Carmelo. Everything you can find. Enemies, rivals, weaknesses. And I need it fast. If Carmelo wanted to protect Mandy, fine. Edward would make her such a liability, such a threat to Carmelo's operations, that the mobster would throw her back himself. He smiled for the first time in days. Sometimes you couldn't win by fighting harder. Sometimes you won by making your enemy wish they'd never gotten involved. At Vito's estate in the Florida Keys, Mandy stood on a terrace overlooking impossible blue water, trying to process the last 12 hours. After their conversation at Mariposa, Vito had made a phone call. Within 30 minutes, Sophia arrived with a packed bag, apologizing but firm. Mandy needed to come with them. Edward knew too much. It wasn't safe. Rosa had been told Mandy was staying with a friend. Marco had arranged someone to cover her shifts. And before Mandy could fully protest, she'd been in an SUV with tinted windows, driving south. The estate was beautiful, modern, minimalist, surrounded by security that tried to look invisible but wasn't. Men in suits stood at entrances. Cameras covered every angle. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. You can leave any time, Vito said, appearing beside her on the terrace. He'd changed into linen pants and a white shirt, looking more relaxed but no less dangerous. But I'd prefer you stay until we handle Laurent permanently. Handle him how? Does it matter? Yes. She turned to face him. If you're doing something illegal because of me, everything I do is illegal, Mandy. That's who I am. His honesty was brutal. But I don't hurt innocent people. Laurent isn't innocent. What do you want from me? The question burst out. Nobody does this for nothing. Protection, debt clearing, job placement. What's the price? Vito studied her for a long moment. There is no price. Bullshit. His eyebrow raised at her language, a hint of amusement crossing his face. You think I'm going to demand something from you? Force you into some arrangement because I helped you? Men always want something. I'm not other men. He moved closer, his voice dropping. I want you safe. I want you to stop looking over your shoulder. I want you to sleep without nightmares. That's what I want. Why? Because you kissed me and asked for help. Because you trusted me when you had no reason to. Because... He stopped, jaw tightening. Because I don't forget debts, and you gave me something worth protecting. Mandy's breath caught. I gave you a kiss. You gave me your trust in the most desperate moment of your life. Do you understand how valuable that is to a man like me? She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to process any of this, the luxury estate, the dangerous man who'd upended her life to protect her, the fact that she felt safer here with a confirmed criminal than she'd ever felt with Edward. I need you to be honest with me, she said quietly. What kind of danger am I in? Really? Vito's expression darkened. Laurent's looking into me. Into my business. That means he'll eventually discover I have enemies, people who'd love to hurt me by hurting someone I'm protecting. You've become a target because of the kiss, Mandy. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. So I can't go back to my normal life. Not yet. Not until I eliminate the threats. He paused. But I promise you I will eliminate them. Something in his tone made her believe him. Made her think he'd burn down the entire world to keep that promise. How long will I need to stay here? As long as it takes. Vito's hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear the first time he'd touched her since the airport. Is that acceptable? Mandy looked into those dark, dangerous eyes and realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could demand to leave, return to Miami, pretend none of this happened, risk Edward finding her again, risk whoever Vito's enemies were. Or she could stay, trust this dangerous man who'd kept every promise he'd made. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Vito smiled, genuinely smiled, and it transformed his face. Good, because I wasn't letting you leave anyway, despite everything. Mandy laughed. The sound surprised them both. Salvatore Russo received the intelligence report at his Miami Beach compound and smiled like a shark scenting blood. Vito Carmelo, his most persistent rival, had brought a woman to his Keys estate. A civilian, someone from New York with no ties to their world. Salvatore had been waiting months for an opening against Vito, some weakness in that impenetrable armor. And now he had it. "Who is she?" he asked his lieutenant, Carlos. "Mandy Lewis, waitress. Vito's been protecting her from an ex-boyfriend. Word is she kissed him at JFK Airport and he's been obsessed since." Salvatore laughed. Vito Carmelo, brought low by a kiss. How romantic. His amusement faded. Find out everything about her. Family, friends, patterns, and prepare a team. For what? To take her. If Carmelo cares about this woman enough to bring her into his home, she's leverage. We take her. We take his focus. We take his focus. We take his Miami territory. Carlos hesitated. Boss, kidnapping a civilian. She stopped being a civilian when Carmelo claimed her. Now she's a chess piece. Salvatore stood, looking out at the ocean. And I'm about to make my move. Mandy spent 3 days at the estate, learning its rhythms. Angelo was there often, always respectful, always watching. Sophia stayed in a guest room down the hall, friendly but professional. Marco came and went, coordinating security. And Vito. Vito was attentive without being suffocating. He worked from a home office, took calls in Italian and Spanish, disappeared for meetings, but he had dinner with her every evening on the terrace, asking about her day, telling her carefully edited stories about his life. She learned he'd grown up in Brooklyn, lost his father young, built his empire from nothing. He didn't apologize for what he was or what he did. That brutal honesty was refreshing after years of Edward's manipulation and lies. On the 4th night, Mandy woke at 3 a.m. to raised voices downstairs. She crept to the landing, listening. Kidnapping attempt planned for tomorrow. Angelo's voice, tense. Carlos Mendez was spotted surveilling the estate. Russo's making his move. How many men? Vito's voice was ice cold. 4, maybe 5. They'll try to grab her during the supply boat delivery. Then we'll be ready. Mandy's heart stopped. Someone was coming for her. Because of Vito. Because she'd kissed him at an airport and pulled him into her nightmare. She backed into her room, her hands shaking. This was real. Not Edward's rage or his father's corruption, actual organized crime. People who killed for strategy and profit. She should run. Should demand Vito let her go. Take her chances alone. But where would she go that Edward couldn't find her? Where would she be safe from men like Salvatore Russo, who now knew her face? There was a knock at her door. Mandy opened it to find Vito standing there in dark slacks and an unbuttoned dress shirt, his expression unreadable. You heard. It wasn't a question. Mandy nodded. I'm doubling security. They won't get near you. This is because of me. Because I kissed you. No. Vito stepped into her room, closing the door. This is because Salvatore Russo is a coward who can't beat me in open competition, so he targets civilians. This is his choice, not yours. People are going to get hurt. People already were going to get hurt. Russo and I have been at war for 2 years. You're just his latest strategy. Vito's hand cupped her face gently, but he miscalculated. Because I don't lose what's mine. Stop saying that. I'm not. You are. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. From the moment you kissed me, Mandy, you became mine, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. She should have been afraid, should have recoiled from the possessiveness in his voice. Instead, something in her chest loosened. After years of Edward's controlling, manipulative obsession, Vito's claiming felt different. Like protection, instead of imprisonment. Like choice instead of trap. What happens tomorrow? She whispered. Tomorrow, Russo's men try to take you. And they fail. His voice was absolute certainty. And then I end this war permanently. How? By making it clear that anyone who threatens you threatens everything I've built. That the cost of touching you is complete destruction. Vito leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. I won't let anyone hurt you, Mandy. Not Laurent, not Russo, not anyone. Do you believe me? She did. God help her, she did. Yes, she breathed. Good. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle, protective. Try to sleep. Tomorrow will be interesting. The attack came during the supply boat delivery at 10 a.m., exactly as Angelo predicted. 4 men in maintenance uniforms approached from the dock. They made it 15 feet before Vito's security team closed in professionals who'd been waiting, armed, prepared. The fight lasted 90 seconds. No guns fired Vito's orders. He didn't want the media attention, but the brutal efficiency of his men left 3 of Russo's team unconscious, and the 4th running back to his boat, bleeding and terrified. Mandy watched from a second-floor window, Sophia beside her, as Vito emerged onto the dock in a crisp suit, looking like he was heading to a business meeting rather than a crime scene. He spoke to the conscious man for 5 minutes. Mandy couldn't hear words, but she saw the fear in the man's eyes, saw him nodding frantically. Then Vito made a phone call, still standing over Russo's men, and walked back to the house. An hour later, news broke. A massive DEA raid on Salvatore Russo's Miami Beach compound. 50 kilos of cocaine seized. 3 lieutenants arrested. Warrants issued for Russo himself. Angelo delivered the news over lunch, and Mandy stared at Vito in shock. "You called the DEA?" "I called contacts who owed me favors." Vito sipped his wine calmly. "Russo wanted to use you as leverage. I'm showing him what leverage actually looks like. He'll know it was you. That's the point. He threatened what's mine. Now he's losing everything that's his." Vito's eyes were merciless. "By tonight, Russo will be in federal custody or fleeing the country. Either way, he's no longer a threat to you." Mandy realized she was seeing Vito Carmelo's true power, not just the security team or the estate or the money, but the ability to dismantle enemies with a single phone call. The network of influence and fear he'd built over decades. It should have terrified her. Instead, she felt safe for the first time since she could remember. "What about Edward?" she asked quietly. Vito smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Angelo's handling that as we speak." In New York, DA Marcus Laurent sat in his office at 1 Hogan Place, staring at the federal subpoena on his desk with shaking hands. Every case he'd dismissed involving his son. Every report he'd buried. Every complaint he'd made disappear. All of it, delivered to the FBI in a comprehensive file that could only have come from someone with deep access to sealed records. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, and Edward was about to face every charge Marcus had protected him from. The door burst open. Edward stood there, wild-eyed, holding his own subpoena. "Dad, what the fuck is happening?" "You didn't listen." Marcus's voice was hollow. "I told you to let her go. I told you to walk away. This is about Mandy? You think—" "I know." Marcus looked at his son with something close to hatred. "You went after a woman protected by Vito Carmelo. You made yourself and me targets. And now we're both paying the price." Edward's face went white. "What are they charging me with?" "Everything. Assault, stalking, harassment, coercion. Multiple counts. Multiple victims." Marcus stood. "They have testimony from 3 other women you terrorized. Women I made disappear from reports. It's all coming out, Edward. You can fix this. You always fix it." "Not this time." Marcus grabbed his coat. "I'm hiring a lawyer. I suggest you do the same. We're done protecting each other. We're done." He walked out, leaving Edward alone in the office, the subpoena trembling in his hands. Edward's phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Laurent." The voice was unfamiliar, professional. "This is Angelo Russo, calling on behalf of Vito Carmelo. I'm sure you've received some interesting mail today." Edward's stomach turned to ice. "What do you want?" "To deliver a message. Mandy Lewis is under Mr. Carmelo's protection permanently. You will never contact her, follow her, or speak her name again. If you do, the charges you're currently facing will be the least of your problems. Do you understand? You can't. We can. We did, and will continue to do so if necessary." Angelo's voice hardened. "You terrorized that woman for 2 years. You broke her, isolated her, made her afraid to exist. That ends today. Accept your legal consequences with dignity, serve your time, and build a new life far away from Mandy Lewis. Or refuse, and discover what Mr. Carmelo does to men who hurt women under his protection. Your choice." The line went dead. Edward stood alone in his father's office, his empire crumbling around him, and finally understood fear the way Mandy had lived it for 2 years. Vito found Mandy on the terrace at sunset, watching pelicans dive for fish in water that glowed orange and pink. "It's done," he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "Laurent's been charged. His father's under federal investigation. Neither of them will bother you again." Mandy was quiet for a long moment. "You destroyed their lives. They destroyed yours first. I evened the scales. You didn't have to." "Yes," Vito said simply. "I did." She turned to look at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd upended everything for her. "What happens now?" "Now you choose." Vito faced her fully. "I can set you up anywhere in the world. New identity, new life, complete security. You can go to college, start a business, do whatever you want. I'll fund it, protect it from a distance. You'll never see me again if that's what you want. Or you stay, Here, with me. You accept that your life is tied to mine now, that you'll always have enemies because I have enemies, that you'll live in a world where normal rules don't apply. His voice dropped. But you'll also be protected, cared for, and valued in ways you've never experienced. You'll be mine, Mandy. Completely. Permanently. Her heart raced. That's not really a choice. It is. I won't force you. I've never forced anyone. Vito's hand came up, tucking hair behind her ear like he had days ago. But I won't lie about what I want. I want you to stay. I want you in my life, by my side. I want to wake up knowing you're safe in my home. He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his face. I want you. Mandy thought about Miami, about Rosa's apartment and Mariposa restaurant, about the normal life she'd dreamed of while running from Edward. Then she thought about the last 3 weeks, about security teams and solved problems, about dinners on the terrace where Vito listened like her words mattered, about the way he'd dismantled every threat against her without asking for anything in return, about how she'd kissed a stranger at an airport and he'd become the first man who'd ever truly protected her, instead of claiming to while destroying her. If I stay, she said carefully, I need ground rules. I'm not a possession. I'm not a trophy. I get a say in my own life. Agreed. And I need honesty. About your business, about threats, about everything. No protecting me with ignorance. Agreed. And she hesitated. And I need time to figure out what this is between us, because it's not normal, Vito. None of this is normal. He smiled slightly. I'm not a normal man, Mandy. I never will be. But I can give you time, and honesty, and respect. He stepped closer. What I can't give you is distance. If you stay, you're mine, not as a prisoner, but as someone under my protection and in my life. Can you accept that? Could she? Could she accept a life tied to a man who operated outside the law, who had enemies and secrets and blood on his hands? But then she remembered Edward's hands on her arms, leaving bruises, his voice in her ear, telling her she was worthless. The 2 years of terror and powerlessness. And she remembered Vito's arm around her waist at JFK. The way he'd looked at Edward like he was an insect. The systematic dismantling of every threat against her. Maybe normal wasn't what she needed. Maybe what she needed was someone strong enough to make her safe. Someone dangerous enough that monsters thought twice. Maybe what she needed was Vito. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. Vito's relief was visible just for a second, just a crack in that controlled facade. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like the desperate one at the airport. This kiss was a promise, a claiming, a beginning. When they broke apart, Mandy was breathless. No regrets? Vito asked softly. She smiled, genuinely smiled for the first time in longer than she could remember. Only that I didn't kiss you sooner. 3 months later, the annual Miami Children's Hospital Charity Gala was held at the Perez Art Museum, drawing celebrities, politicians, and the city's elite, both legitimate and otherwise. Vito Carmelo arrived fashionably late in a midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo, and every head in the room turned. But it wasn't Vito who made them stare. It was the woman on his arm. Mandy wore an emerald green gown that hugged her curves like water, custom made by a designer whose waiting list was 2 years long unless Vito Carmelo called personally. Her hair was swept into an elegant updo, diamond earrings catching the light, Vito's gift, though she'd argued they were too expensive. But it wasn't the dress or the jewelry that made her remarkable. It was the way she walked into that ballroom, head high, shoulders back, fear gone from her eyes. She looked like someone who belonged beside one of the most powerful men in Florida, someone who'd chosen to be there. The whispers started immediately. That's her. The woman Carmelo brought to his estate. I heard he destroyed Salvatore Russo's entire operation over her. Marcus Laurent's career ended after his son went after her. She must be something special for Carmelo to go that far. Mandy heard the whispers and felt Vito's hand settle possessively on her lower back. 3 months ago, she would have shrunk from the attention, would have wanted to hide. Now, she lifted her chin and met the stares directly. Let them look. Let them wonder. She was Mandy Lewis, and she stood beside Vito Carmelo by choice, by strength, by survival. Nervous? Vito murmured in her ear as they moved through the crowd. Terrified, she admitted. But I'm done running from fear. His smile was proud. Good, because half the people in this room are afraid of me. The other half are trying to use you to get to me. You need to know which is which. Then teach me. And over the next 3 hours, he did. Introduced her to politicians and business owners, to criminals masquerading as entrepreneurs, taught her to read body language and power dynamics, treated her like a partner, not an accessory. When they danced, Vito pulled her close, and Mandy felt the eyes of the room on them. No regrets? He asked, echoing the question from 3 months ago. Mandy looked up at this dangerous, complicated man who'd saved her life in ways that had nothing to do with Edward Laurent, who'd shown her that strength didn't have to mean violence, that protection didn't have to mean control, that being claimed could feel like freedom instead of imprisonment. None, she whispered. Only gratitude that I was brave enough to kiss a stranger. Vito's expression softened that rare vulnerability he only showed her. And I'm grateful you chose me. Always, Mandy said, and she meant it. The woman who'd run through JFK Airport 3 months ago was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone protected, someone who'd looked at the darkness and found her own power within it, someone who'd kissed a mafia boss and found her salvation. If this story moved you, here's the truth: only about 5% of you watching are actually subscribed. And that's wild because subscribing is free, and it tells us you want more stories like this. Every like, every subscription, it fuels us to keep creating these emotional journeys for you. It's literally how we know to keep going. So if you felt something during Linda and Adriano's story, hit that subscribe button right now, and smash the like button while you're at it. And see that video on your screen? It's another story that will completely destroy you emotionally in the best way. Most people who watch one story end up binge-watching 5 more. Don't fight it, just click. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.